This podcast is sponsored by Teens and Youth in Leadership, TYIL Africa, an organization that is committed to raising generations of young leaders across Africa. Our programs include leadership education, leadership fellowship, research training, webinars, and conferences. Stay informed of our programs by following us on LinkedIn at TYIL and at TYIL Africa on Instagram.
Hello, you're welcome to the Future of Leadership podcast, where we discuss about issues related to leadership and, in fact, youth leadership. My name is Israel Oyedare, and I'm the host of this podcast. I'm also the founder of Teens and Youth in Leadership, popularly known as TYIL, an organization focused on youth leadership development. Through this podcast, you will learn from seasoned professionals and leadership scholars on their thoughts and perspectives on youth leadership. Stay tuned. I have here with me one of the most recognized and prominent leadership researcher in the world. His name is Dr. Riggio, and he has dedicated decades in the research and promotion of the field of leadership. I'm so excited to have you today, sir.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Israel.
So, Dr. Riggio, you have actually done lots of inspiring and you have accomplished a lot. What would you say has contributed significantly to the success of your career and leadership journey? And what has inspired you?
So my journey, well, I think a big thing, in terms of being a scholar is that I really love science and the scientific method, and the idea of curiosity, I think, is really important. So I think that when it comes to research, what inspires me is finding the answers to questions. And I think as a social scientist, I can apply the methodologies that I've learned to try to answer some of these questions about leadership, about other areas. When I started out, I was studying relationships more generally, not necessarily leadership, but I was looking at all kinds of personal relationships. And then the one that attracted me mid-career was leadership, because leadership is a relationship between leaders and followers, and it's a very complex relationship because we have a relationship with political leaders. We may never meet them, but they influence us. And we have people in our workplace who are in leadership positions, and they influence us. And when we talk about teachers and people who develop other people, in some ways that's a leadership position. So I think the concept of leadership is very broad, not just in the sense of a boss and an employee, but there's lots of ways of looking at leadership.
I like the fact that you acknowledge that leadership is a very broad concept. We have the political leadership, organizational leadership. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you think your youth or teenage years influenced your leadership ideology or journey?
Yeah, I think, I grew up in the 1960s in the US, and this was a time of a lot of social changes. And I think, and I was drawn to leaders, to just observing them as a young, I was a teenager. Well, when, President John F. Kennedy, when he was assassinated, I was in third grade, and it had an impact on me. And later on, we saw the civil rights movement, and Martin Luther King Jr., who was also assassinated, another leader, Robert Kennedy, and I think it was a time where leadership really mattered, and losing those leaders, I think, had an effect on me, and learning about them had an effect on me. Then we got into the Vietnam War, and I think there were failures of leadership in the Vietnam War, and so I think all of those things probably helped set me on my journey. Not that when I was young I said, "Oh, I'm going to study leadership," but I think all of those early experiences probably contributed to my interest in leadership.
Thank you. So, in the context of youth, how would you define leadership? How do you think youth of this age should perceive leadership opportunities?
So I think when we talk about, youth leadership for young people, I mean, I think there's a few things we can talk about is like, how do you develop young people into leaders? But I think one of the things that we want to really focus on uh, when we're talking about young people is, you know, what kind of leaders and what kind of leadership do we want to promote in people? And one of the things I think that's very important, and some of my research is focused on character.
Mm,
And so I think if we talk about what makes a good leader, I think a good leader at its foundation has to be a good person.
mm,
And that's all about character. So I think one of the things that we should try to promote in kids is make them people of good character, because if they have good character, then they're going to be a good leader. Leadership is really about persuading people, about using either personal power or organizational or societal power. But you can use that power in good ways or bad ways. And so I think one of the things we want to promote in young people is, good leadership. And good leadership means doing the right thing, focusing on other people, not focusing on oneself, not being selfish, really concerned for the greater good. So a lot of things that I think we can do with young people is we can encourage them to participate in their communities, to become civically engaged, to learn about other people, learn to be accepting of different people, different cultures, different. So I think there's a lot we can do that will help young people become better leaders. But I think at its base level, we're just promoting them becoming good people.
mm, Thank you so much. A focus on the person first before the position or the task of leadership.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, sir.
good point. Yeah.
Now, the world has changed into a more connected, globally advanced, and technologically advanced system. Do you think youth have the capacity or they're in the right position to actually lead at this time of globalization? And how do you think they can participate in global leadership?
Well, I mean, probably with social media and the interconnectedness of the world, young people have an advantage that people of earlier generations didn't have. If you go back a couple generations, the only way you could have global impact would be to travel to another country, live in another country. I still think that's important for people to get that kind of experience. But today you can impact people around the world and do it easily and cheaply through technology, through connecting, on social media and different kinds of audio visual technology that we have. So I think that young people can get engaged. I think, um, you know, it, at some level, it starts at home at the local level. Young people should try to get involved in their communities, in their local communities. But there's no reason why they shouldn't learn about global issues, the issues that are affecting all of us. If we talk about some of the global issues like war and climate change and these kinds of things, I think young people need to be knowledgeable about these things, about what's happening in the world. And again, I think it comes back to this kind of foundation of science. We have to trust the science, the research that we're doing, what it's telling us about what could be happening to our environment in terms of, global weather changes, but also what's happening to our social environment, with conflicts around the world. How can we solve these conflicts? How can we make the world a better place? So I think that it's not, you're never too young to learn about these things.
Mm, mm. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. So now I'm going to bring it to adult leadership. Now, do you think there's a connection there is a need for young leaders or youth leadership to actually rely on adult leadership? And how do you think adult leadership can pave the way for youth to lead others and yeah, in this generation?
Yeah. Well, I think there's lots. I think, again, we have to look at leadership broadly.
Hmm.
So if we think about what is the earliest influence on a young person, it's parents. Parents are the first role models that children have. And then later it's other significant adults. So teachers once a child goes to school, coaches if they participate in athletics or other kinds of activities. And we talk about in leadership development, we talk about coaching, we talk about mentoring. And we have people early in our lives who serve as mentors, who serve as coaches for us to develop young people, but also to develop their capacity to lead. So I think that you know all of us can have an impact on younger people either through parenting, that many of us are parents and we
Mhm.
want to impact our kids, but I also think we can serve roles as mentors to young people, more older people, senior people, mentoring younger people. We have a lot of mentoring programs at work, and I think those are important and effective. We can, talk about being involved in youth activities as a coach or a mentor. So I think there's lots and lots of ways for adults to help develop the next generation of leaders by you know by actively engaging with young people.
Hmm. Yeah, so this is gonna be my last question, but and it's an extra question. I know it's outside the context of youth leadership, but what do you think is the future of leadership? Now, looking at leadership both as a theory and as a practice, 50 years down the line, what do you think people would perceive leadership as?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of challenges. I mean, I think we still have some issues to deal with in terms of, why are people drawn to leaders who I think objectively are not good, are to bad leaders, right? We have, much of the world is ruled by dictators. We have a lot of people who are, rather than being positive role models for youth or for people in general, they're negative role models. There's a lot of odd elements in human nature that draw us to the dark side of leadership.
Hmm.
And so I think the future is to try to better understand why people are drawn to these negative leaders. Why do they pledge allegiance to a dictator who controls our human, rights, our human freedoms? And I think that that's really one of the areas that we have to understand a little bit better. And
Hmm.
then I think the other area is followership, is we haven't given much attention to the role of followers. It's very clear that the only way you're going to stop a bad leader is for the followers to refuse to follow. The constituents to say, we're not going to do this anymore. Instead, there's a tendency for followers to just go along, to just be obedient, to just obey, or in some cases, enable the bad leader and make things worse. Some of the inner circle of the leaders are worse than the leaders themselves. And so I think we have to understand a lot more about that. And I think that if you look at the leadership literature, you'll see we don't have much compared to good leadership. We don't know much about bad leadership. Compared to leaders, we don't know much about followers. And I think that those two things, followers and their ability to stand up to bad leaders, is critical if we're going to have a more democratic, more free society. So, I think it has enormous implications. And even at the family level or the community level, we still see examples of bad leadership. I mean, in the US, we have people who act out, who commit atrocious crimes. We've got all the gun violence and all these kinds of things. And to some extent, those are really leadership issues, that these people weren't mentored, they didn't become good people because they didn't get those kinds of experiences. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done to try to make society better, and it's the role of leaders to try to help to make society better.
Thank you so much, Dr. Riggio. Thank you so much, sir. I've really had an interesting time learning from you today. I know this is a podcast for so many people that would listen, but this is also my own personal time to learn from a scholar like yourself. And I appreciate you spending time with me today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Happy to do it, Israel.
Yeah. Do you have any closing statements or you want to say to people, youth particularly, who are in leadership positions or those aspiring to be leaders or those who haven't yet discovered their leadership potentials?
Yeah. Yeah, I think everyone should think about their personal potential, whether that's the potential to be a leader, to be a person in kind of a position of power, or just to be an exemplary follower, somebody who gets things done behind the scenes, so to say. So I think everybody can contribute to society, but it really is about making an effort to become a good person, to engage in good acts, to increase your personal potential. And all of that, I think, is going to make a better society.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Future of Leadership podcast today. If you are here to kindly share, subscribe, leave a review, and follow us across our social media platforms, including Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, all at TYIL. See you in the next episode.